we've been doing this band for 8 years. Most of that, well, definitely the last like 4 or 5 years, we've been self-hiring venues and doing it ourselves. And, we always took the view that we would be able to self-hire until we got to Wembley Stadium. And unfortunately, once you get past the 200-300 caps, it's just not possible. People just won't reply to emails because they've never heard of you.
You are now listening to the Creative Juice podcast, brought to you by Indepreneur.io.
What's up, Indies? Welcome back to Creative Juice. I'm your host, Jack McCarthy. With me is my co-host, Ed Isola. And we've got a very special guest with us today to talk about overcoming challenges with tour marketing, which is something that happens fairly often. It's probably one of the most likely segments of your marketing to encounter blockers and obstacles of a variety of different kinds. So we're going to be talking about that today. Ed, would you like to introduce our illustrious guest for this episode?
Yes, I would. I'm actually glad we're doing this, and I wish we would have done it 2 weeks ago because I was doing a panel with Cirque last weekend, and we started talking about tour marketing, and he just looked at me and goes, "Tell him about Andy." And I was like, "What do you want me to tell him about Andy?" So I'm glad to get the insight today. And without further ado, Mr. Andy, welcome.
Hey guys, thank you so much for having me. Again, second time on the podcast. I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah, man. So pumped to have you. Andy pulled off some really, really interesting, I'll call it tour marketing gymnastics recently. His band, As December Falls, in preparation for it's a fall tour, right?
It is, yeah, October.
Very cool. So yeah, you pulled off some really interesting gymnastics to kind of get you out of the data dark spots that often come with touring at a higher level and having, different parties involved, from promoters to booking agents to different venues and things like that, which is something that happens, I think, fairly often with artists. I was really excited to have this episode too, Ed, because I think personally, this is probably something that you and I have dealt with like a nauseating amount of times in the past 5 years with the artists that we work with at IndieX, working with kind of like inconvenient tech stacks, having ticket pages on all sorts of different websites. Sometimes it's on the venue site, sometimes it's on Eventbrite, sometimes it's Ticketmaster, sometimes it's the band's website. That's a really common pain point for us at the agency, for sure, especially when working with artists that are at a higher level and doing a hefty amount of touring. There's usually a number of hands kind of in it. And that presents for, a lot of technical challenges on the tracking front. Andy, I'm curious to hear what you guys were up against in terms of this problem that kind of plagues artists and their teams.
Yeah, man. So just to give a little bit of background for anyone who hasn't seen the previous podcast episode where we were all talking about my last tour, that was a self-booked, self-funded, self-promoted tour. So we weren't working with any booking agents. We weren't working with a promoter. We self-hired all the venues and we were running the ticketing ourselves on our own website. So that meant that we have full control on the ticketing page. We could pixel everything. We could do all the data tracking, all the retargeting, all that great stuff that we love doing marketing-wise. Whereas, we sold out that tour. We sold 3,000 tickets across 16 dates. We ended up signing with a booking agent for the next tour off the back of that one because it went so well. And our booking agent just came to us and said, "Look, it's incredible what you guys have done on your own so far, but if you want to take it to the next level and actually start playing bigger venues rather than these small 200-300 cap rooms that you have been playing, you're going to need to start working with a promoter, because unfortunately, once you get to a certain level of venue, they won't work with you if they don't know you, because it's too much financial risk for the venue. If it's a 500-600 cap room and you only sell 100 tickets, they are going to lose money even though you've self-hired and paid for it, because they won't make enough money on the bar, for example. So they will only work with promoters that they know. So if you want to do a much bigger tour on the next run, you're going to have to start looking at promoters. Now, I've very much encountered the same problem that you and Ed have had in the past, in terms of when you start working with ticketing agencies and promoters, they've traditionally not been very good with tech stack or any data stuff. They'll give you links to all kinds of different pages where you can't really run that effective marketing that you really want to. You're stuck potentially just sending traffic, not being able to see if any of them convert, and you're kind of shooting in the dark a little bit. So when we started putting together this October tour at the end of this year, we were really talking to two major promoters in the UK. One of the promoters, like the biggest two in the UK, one of them, I'm not going to name any names because I don't want to throw any shade, but one of them basically said, you know, it will be the same that we do for all our artists. You will get given a ticket link and that's it. No data, no pixel. We're not going to build anything for you. You just get what you're given and we'll all hope that it goes well.
So the red flags naturally went up for you right there.
Absolutely. You know, that's not really what you want to hear from a band of our level, that we know that we need to do marketing to be able to sell these tickets. We're not that type of band that we can just announce the tour and it's all going to sell out within minutes. You know, not naming any names, 502s, but we're not at that level. You know, we need to do some marketing to sell tickets. So yeah, that was a definite big red flag for me. Whereas the other promoter came to us and said, look, we love what you guys have done on your own so far. We get it. We understand that you guys have built this incredible thing and we don't want to mess with that. We want to be able to enable you to take it to the next level. So they actually came to us and, you know, it's a typical promoter deal. You know, I'm not going to hide anything here. We are getting paid guarantees up to a certain percent of ticket sales. And if we sell any more tickets than the guarantee, I think it's 80% of tickets, we get the guarantee. Any more than 80%, we start taking an actual cut from profits with them, which is a pretty standard deal from when you're starting to work with a promoter. But on top of that, they're actually giving us a marketing budget and allowing me to spend all the marketing, well, most of the marketing budget. You know, they've got some of their own typical ad stuff that they're doing, but we get most of the ad budget up front paid to us and we can spend it on ads, which is incredible. And part of that is that they've ended up building us what we call a white label website. So it's a ticketing site that they traditionally use themselves, but what they've done is they've set it up on a subdomain for us. So it's like asdecemberfools.ticketing site, as it were, .com. So it's a subdomain, and very smartly, their tech team has built it so it looks identical to our Shopify store, which means that I've been really able to implement it into our Shopify store, and you can't even tell that you've gone to a different page when you click through to tickets, which has been incredible because it makes it a really nice customer journey for any of our fans who are like buying merch, or, you know, they're going through our store, they can see we've got ticket links up, and it feels like they're still part of the same storefront, as it were, when they're buying their tickets. Obviously, the downside is that the back end is different. So one of the obstacles that we encountered, for example, is that we can't sell merch with tickets. They'd have to place one order with us for the merch, one order with the ticketing company for the actual tickets. That's been the only real snag, but unfortunately there's no way around that unless we were to give the promoter like merch and build out extra products, which is, you know, way too much of a headache that I wanted to deal with. So we've just, you know, we've kept it separate for now.
I just have a couple things I want to kind of like highlight off of that, Jack, before you jump in. I think this is really interesting hearing you talk about this, Andy, because I feel like all the lessons and revelations you were having are things that I was having at the same time, in terms of like, what is standard? What is normal? How does this actually operate? And I think the first thing to kind of like highlight here is that what you're talking about, it's not to be overlooked that comes after you've already proven you can sell tickets. So this isn't some strategy where you're going to like immediately partner with a promoter and do this. This is like you sold 3,000 tickets, and then it was like, what's the next step? So I think that's one thing to kind of like highlight. The second thing is that I also recently found out, to your point, like once you do that first step, as you progress your touring, you do have to start working with big promoters for all the reasons you outlined. And that wasn't something I had ever thought about, but it also starts to set you up for like, well, go work with this big promoter. And then if you sell at the 500 capacity room, now they're getting you into festivals. And so that's kind of how that starts to build, just for like everyone listening. I didn't realize that. And then the other thing that also I thought was interesting that you touched on that I recently learned is that like, it's pretty standard. If you view what Andy's doing right now as like stage 2 of like stage 1 being the self-ticket sales, first tours, that kind of stuff. Stage 2, it is really standard to work with one promoter for the duration of the tour, and also for them to pay you up front for each show. Like you said, I didn't realize that. And I've had conversations with some huge acts who it's the same thing. They get paid, you know, here's a 3-month tour, here's $20 million, like go do the shows. But if there's profits, you can get a cut of that. But these promoters are essentially buying the rights to your tours, which I didn't realize that was how that operated. So just kind of like cool information as you start to reach this level that I was surprised to learn, and I think it's good for everybody to know.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I completely agree, man. You know, we've been doing this band for 8 years. Most of that, well, definitely the last like 4 or 5 years, we've been self-hiring venues and doing it ourselves. And, you know, we always took the view that we would be able to self-hire until we got to Wembley Stadium. And unfortunately, you know, once you get past the 200-300 caps, it's just not possible. You know, people just won't reply to emails because they've never heard of you.
Yeah, I think what was really smart though is like, this is where like you're obviously a very good marketer. Some would even say a great marketer, but like you're really good at marketing, and so it's like you were able to adapt to the rules of the game, so to speak. It's like, hey, okay, well, guess what? We can't hire this venue ourselves, but we know we need this, so let me go figure out how to do it. And I know that this wasn't like one conversation that you had. This was like, I remember we were talking about it, and you were kind of like, what do we do? And like, how do the promoters and that kind of stuff. And so like there was back and forth, if I remember correctly. And I feel like that was really good because like a lot of things with marketing, it's like, well, you knew what you wanted and you were able to have those conversations because you took the time over the last 8 years to learn. And I think that's super, super important because it helps you find a solution and you don't have to just give up control and say, all right, well, this person who probably knows way less than I do can now handle this thing and get suboptimal results.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's definitely worth highlighting that a huge amount of being able to secure this deal was our booking agent. You know, big shout out to Ian. He's incredible. When he signed us as our booking agent, he just got it instantly, like what we're about, what we do. Not necessarily like understanding like the intricacies of like the marketing, but like he just gets the overall picture. And he knew that he didn't want to take us as a band and then break what was working. And, you know, it's also definitely worth noting that the deal that he secured with the promoter in terms of like being able to build us a website, installing the pixel for us, getting us domain verification, you know, all the stuff that was like needed for the tech stack to work. He negotiated that incredibly well. And he and the promoter have both said to us they have never done this with any other band before. This is a first time thing for them. So, you know, that is definitely something worth noting, that this isn't probably something that a lot of promoters would be willing to do right now. I'm hoping that this is the future. You know, as bands get into marketing and understand how to sell their own tickets, you know, promoters are going to have to evolve with the current times. Hopefully this is the first time it's ever happened, but definitely, hopefully not the last.
Well, I want to talk about that a little bit, actually. That's a really good point. Like, for one, you guys saw a problem ahead of you. You know, you looked at this obstacle kind of staring you in the face. You were like, we've got our process for marketing our shows and we know it works really, really well. Now we're moving up to the next level, which is, you know, this is typically where these challenges start to actually rear their ugly head. It's like, oh, there's multiple people involved. I can't see any data. I can't even get a count of tickets sold in like every week. You know, the amount of things that we typically see in this arena it'll make your head spin. You know, just something as simple as like, can I get a ticket count every day so that I can try to manually track what I'm spending versus what I'm making? Something as simple as that is a challenge, let alone everything else that you tried to do here with building this, you know, white labeled sort of checkout that looks exactly like the branding that you guys have on your store and the customer journey that fans are used to. But I do want to touch on this. Like, what was the process like of negotiating this and bringing it to the table, both to your booking agent and to the promoters that you're working with? What was that process like? How did you go about asking? What negotiating points did you kind of deal with? And what, you know, honestly, what did you guys bring to the table? I think this is important for our listeners to think about, is like, what did you have to come to the table with to be able to say, like, listen, we know that this will work, but we need it to operate this way. Otherwise, we're all going to lose. How did you present it as like a win-win?
Yeah, so for sure. So stepping back to summer of last year, we were selling tickets for obviously the last tour that happened in last October, November time. And our booking agent, how he actually discovered us, we were playing his hometown, Birmingham, at a venue that he himself, he promotes as well on the side. So he does some local promotion for shows. And so it's a venue that he knows very, very well. It was a 300 cap room and we had sold it out essentially 4 months in advance with, you know, using ads and marketing technique. And he basically, why he got in touch was because he was getting bombarded bombarded with our ads because, he's a rock fan, he works in the industry, he very much fits our demographic in terms of like targeting. So poor guy, he must have just seen our ads absolutely everywhere, which is actually why he got in contact, because it was like, who the hell is this band? They're selling out this 300 cap room. I've never heard of them before. And all of a sudden they're just blowing up my Facebook and Instagram. I need to check them out and get in contact with them. So that's why he came to us, and that's how that relationship started. And obviously, the tour was already booked for last year. We were already mid-selling tickets. We ended up selling out every show. And he was very much part of that talking process in terms of like me breaking down, one, how much we were selling tickets for, how ticket sales were doing. Even though he wasn't involved in those shows, he was very interested in getting regular ticket updates to understand how we were doing, where we were doing better in terms of like areas in the country, just so that he could think moving forward, festivals, future tours, being able to know where we can sell tickets is really valuable information for a booking agent. So he was really a big part of understanding at that point, the tech stack that we were running, what ads we were running. So, again, he really, really got it from like day one, because that was a big part of one, why he wanted to work with us. And two, just him seeing us sell out the tour right in front of his eyes, So when we were then starting to negotiate with promoters, he already knew exactly what we wanted, how we did the last tour, and knew that that was exactly what we wanted to do again for the next tour. And finding a partner that would work with us and not basically fight against us was really important to him and to us. So in terms of like what we could bring to the negotiation table, it was simply just how many tickets we sold on the last run. I gave a full breakdown in terms of ad spend, how much we spent on various cities, how many tickets we sold per city. So he took all of that information to the promoter and said, look, this is what they did with this amount of ad spend. If you guys give them double the ad spend, then hopefully we should be able to sell just under double the tickets at bigger venues. And that's really what we took to the negotiation table. And obviously we had these, not two offers, but like two promoters pitching to do the tour with us. And obviously one was being much more flexible in terms of being able to provide us what we needed in terms of like, tech stack and assets, etc. And the other promoter just wasn't that interested. They just wanted to do the tour. So, that's why we ended up going with the promoter that we did.
So in terms of the actual tech stack that you guys built, this white labeled website and the tech stack that went along with it, it sounds like what you guys were at risk of losing was your well-branded website that your fans were used to going through, but you were also at risk of losing like Facebook pixel tracking, and as a result, the ability to run conversion campaigns and do, retargeting and have a checkout that was, really customized to what you guys were looking to do. Does that pretty much outlay like what the drawbacks would have been if you guys hadn't come to this sort of solution?
Yeah, that's absolutely it. So it's mainly tech stack. And also as well, like actually working with a promoter, because they are running the ticketing. So a lot of big promoters have their own ticketing sites. So for example, I think Ticketmaster, for example, is owned by Live Nation, and that's where they run their ticketing through, because, it benefits promoters to have their own ticketing site because they take a cut from the booking fee, for example. So our promoter had their own ticketing site, which is how they built the white label for us. And that was all on them. I didn't do anything for them. I literally gave them some detailed instructions in terms of like, how to install the pixel, how to share domain verification. And then they gave me discount codes, and I ran some test purchases just to make sure that everything worked out. But they were great. Their tech team was amazing. Definitely a much better experience than some of my previous experiences when I've worked with IndieX clients, for example, who are on labels or working with big companies, and they just don't have any idea about how this technology works. These guys, they understood it, and it was absolutely amazing. It was really great. So yeah, that was the main concern about like not having data tracking, not being able to see if anyone's buying, if the ads are actually working at all. And like you said before, not getting regular updates in terms of sales numbers makes it really hard to optimize ads, especially in a post iOS 14 world where Facebook is losing a lot of data. Yeah, so that was a really great thing, obviously, for us to be able to do. One of the other things that we found on the last tour is that a lot of venues have ticketing deals with specific ticketing companies, and they, for example, will only, even if you self-hire, they'll only give you like 50% of tickets, and therefore the other 50% of tickets have to go through a ticketing website. What we found with going through a really big promoter is that they have much bigger bargaining power, because they are putting shows on at these venues on a regular basis, rather than just being a band that's hiring the venue once a year, maybe once every 2 years. You've got no bargaining power with that venue, really, because they don't really need your custom that much. Like, obviously it's going to be great if they book it, if they let you hire the room and it sells out, they're going to have one great night, but they are a business running, probably 300 plus shows across a year. Like you are nothing to them. Whereas a big promoter potentially putting on lots and lots of shows at that venue has much bigger bargaining power. So for example, one of the things that we've been able to do this time is once this ticketing website run through the promoter runs out of their allocation of tickets, let's say it's 50%, they're able to claw back like another 25% that we weren't able to do last time on our own. So that's also a definite benefit of working with a big promoter.
That's great. Yeah, that's a super good point. Like, because they have such probably a wide book of business with the venues that they're working with, immediately it's like, okay, hey, you're going to work with us on this because there's a lot at stake if you don't. That's a really interesting point, not to press hard on that, but I think that that's important. So what did you guys end up with at the tail end of settling on what was possible, and what did the campaign structure end up looking like as a result? How different is it from what you would normally do?
Yeah, so in terms of like tech stack then, one of my concerns, and I mentioned this earlier, is that we are not able, with the current tech stack that we've got, being able to bundle merch items with tickets. And that was something that we found to be very, very profitable last time we did our tour ads, because it was all going through our Shopify store. We were able to have 3 different products. Essentially, we had one just a ticket on its own, one being a tour t-shirt on its own, and then a bundle of the two with a slight discount if people bought them at the same time. And that was, a really great incentive. We sold, I think we did 3,000 tickets. I can't remember how many t-shirts we sold, but it was more than 400 t-shirts across the whole tour. And that was, it was great. Really, really good. Before we'd even set out the door, we'd already sold something like 400 t-shirts. The exact numbers escape me. But obviously this time we weren't able to do that. So one of the ideas that we formulated with the promoter was that we would have a pre-sale for a week, whereby we announced the tour and launched the tour t-shirt and said to everyone, you can only buy tickets throughout this pre-sale week if you order a tour t-shirt, which was, it's definitely one way around the problem. So essentially what they built out for us, and again, this is really great of them, we had our tour t-shirt in our Shopify store, and what they did is they set up a secret link, and I then programmed an email to fire. Essentially, whenever anyone bought that tour t-shirt for that week, they got a secret link going to the ticketing site where they could actually then buy tickets, as it were. And I think we sold around 150 t-shirts in that week, which was really cool. That was a great way to launch the tour and make some revenue on our end. And it was really nice of the promoter to do that for us, because at the end of the day, they're not taking any cut from those tour shirts. Like, they literally just did that because, I asked them to and they agreed, which was really, really nice of them. So that was great. And then obviously once we started then just announcing the tour, everything just worked out the gate. In terms of the ads that I'm running, well, typical stuff. I'm doing obviously email marketing. So I segmented my entire drip audience by city based on previous purchases, which was obviously something I was able to do because we sold tickets ourselves last time. So all those cities that we'd sold out on the last tour and previous tours, I had in little segments, and I emailed them specifically, rather than just sending them a whole bunch of dates. I just said, hey, first name, we're coming back to Sheffield, we'd love to see you there. That wasn't obviously the exact copy, but with the ticket link, and then we were able to send them straight there. In terms of like the ads, it's exactly the same setup as last time we really spoke on the podcast. I'm using cold conversion ads, essentially, with a really, really broad targeting. I've tried a variety of different things. I'm definitely seeing a downside post iOS 14. Obviously my last tour was just before those changes kicked in, and tracking was much, much better back then. Now it's definitely much, much worse than it was a year ago, which unfortunately is something that that we all have to deal with in the marketing world. But yeah, I'm running very, very similar ads. I'm getting weekly ticket updates from the promoter, so I can really align what I'm seeing on Facebook's back end with what the promoter's seeing in terms of like sales. And yeah, I'm seeing a difference probably between 30 to 40% in terms of like numbers of purchases, i.e. we're selling about 30 to 40% more than Facebook is reporting, which is very, very similar to what I'm seeing across all my ad accounts for all sales campaigns. So yeah, in terms of like creative, I'm running just fan finder videos essentially. And then I've got a retargeting ad set up for anyone that lands on the ticketing page but then doesn't purchase, which obviously because of iOS 14 is probably still going to hit people that are purchasing, but there's nothing you can do about that, unfortunately. You're just going to have to hope that the ads find the right people anyway.
For sure. That's great. And I think it's really interesting how you guys went about overcoming that merch obstacle, since that was something that couldn't totally be solved by the stack that you guys built with your team. It's cool that you went about and did, basically like pre-sale early access to tickets when you buy the tour tee. I think that's really cool. And I also think that it's important because you could like really anyone could do that. Like it's just a matter of asking. Like even if you don't work with a promoter to set up something like you guys did, like a whole white labeled site where you've got data backend access and you can install your pixels and stuff like that and verify the domain with Facebook. Even if you don't get everything you want out of this, you could do something like a merch early access ticket pre-sale. And that's probably, pretty low hanging fruit for a lot of artists.
Oh yeah, definitely. Selling 150 t-shirts in 1 week. And again, because it's a pre-order, essentially, like we've not bought any of that stock. So that's money up front for an item that you're not going to send out until, probably about 4 to 6 weeks before the tour starts. Which is, it was definitely a great thing for them to do for us, and definitely something that any artist really could do, regardless of, the tech stack that you're building. If you are working with a promoter, or even if you're just doing it yourself, it's definitely something to think about whether you can do a similar thing where it doesn't even need to be a t-shirt. I've seen a lot of bands, bigger bands especially, do it where, if you buy the new album, you get access to early tickets and stuff like that. And it's a great way to incentivize purchase early on before you then sell tickets,
Definitely, yeah. And we'll have to link back to in the show notes to the previous episode where we had you on talking about your campaign structure and what you guys are doing. It's really interesting to hear about that because there's, a few different plays that we often use at IndieX and just kind of the strategies that we recommend in general here at Indepreneur for tour marketing. It's cool to hear about what you're doing and what I know you to do in other arenas when you're faced with kind of an inefficient tech stack. It's really interesting. So if you guys want to learn about that, you can check out, we'll leave a link in the show notes for Indie Pro, and you can check out the selling tickets for live shows training. It goes through a lot of the technical pieces and the strategy layout of the ad campaigns that Andy was talking about. I'm curious if you have any advice for artists or bands that, might think they're in a place to either build a tech stack like this for themselves that they've got full access to, and then negotiating to be able to use that, or working with their promoter, their booking agent, their team to do something like this. What are some of the steps that you would recommend? Like, what was kind of if you could zoom out 30,000 foot and be like, okay, here's what I did to realize that I needed this, and then start putting the ball in motion.
Yeah, so I think for me, step one is, do you genuinely need to work with a promoter? Like, is that something that you absolutely have to do? Are you at that level where you can't proceed anymore without working with someone else? And that's been my view across everything else, whether it's a manager, whether it's a label, whether it's publishing, like, are you outside of your comfort zone of what you can achieve on your own? If the answer is yes, and you are absolutely adamant that you do need to be working with a partner, then that's probably the time to be thinking about it. But most of the time, and most of the artists that I do speak to are still at the level where they could probably do it themselves, and are probably going to end up doing a much better job if they do it themselves, rather than working with a partner too early on when they don't have enough bargaining power to actually get a deal that suits both parties. Which is really what we found with the other big promoter. They were probably the biggest promoter in the UK, and again, no names, but because of that, they weren't willing to negotiate with us, even despite the fact that we'd done 3,000 tickets, because for them, that's still tiny fry compared to some of the tours that they're putting on, where they're selling millions of tickets across the world. Do you know what I mean?
Totally.
So I think that's my first piece of advice. Make sure, one, that you are definitely at the stage where you actually need to work with a partner. Two, make sure that you have enough bargaining power to get the best deal possible. It would have been very easy for the promoter to say to us, no, we're not going to work with you. This is our way or the highway, essentially. And I think at that point, probably I would have taken a step back and spoken to our booking agent and said, look, is there any other way that we can do this? Do we still self-hire and do it again? Maybe it's just a case of we need to have 2 sold-out tours to really prove our worth before going back to a promoter and saying, look, this is the position. Please work with us in the way that, will benefit everyone. Because at the end of the day, if we'd gone with promoter 1, for example, who wasn't willing to set up this tech stack and didn't give us any marketing budget, and they were doing all their own marketing, doing everything themselves, it's very plausible that we would be going out on the road in October playing 500 to 700 cap rooms to about 50 people because they hadn't been marketed properly. And that was absolutely a risk that I was not willing to take, and I would not have signed a deal like that with anyone, regardless of, if we didn't have any other option, I would have just self-hired again and just taken the bullet of playing smaller venues.
I think that's so important. That's a really important cautionary tale here. I'd be curious to hear your take on that too, Ed, but that is a big risk, and I think a lot of bands and artists don't consider that. There still is the kind of all-pervading sense in the industry of like, oh, if someone's coming around to help me or partner with me, like they're going to take care of it. And I think you said it well, and like that's not really the case. Like, and there's actually a lot more risk when you've gone from having success to bringing on a partner. There's a lot of risk of slipping.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And like, even, you know, with a promoter paying you a guarantee and that risk is lessened, I still don't want to be paid a guarantee to go out to play to 50 people, because like once you take into account your merch sales aren't going to exist, because, you know, you're going to sell maybe 10 t-shirts over 100 t-shirts that you would have sold a night. You know, your cost is still going to be the same in terms of like hotels, vans, sound engineers, lighting engineers, photographer. All those costs stay the same, but you lose out from not having anyone at the show, and you're not going to have a good time. You know, no one wants to be in a 500 cat room playing to 10 people. Like, absolutely.
You really got to know your numbers.
I think also like the risk of like if you go out and just like the public perception of how your career is going also could tank. You know, if you're like, look at this band, like, oh, they're selling out 200-300 capacity rooms, and then the very next tour is like empty rooms. Not only will people be like, wait, what's going on? Other partners won't want to work with you. So I feel like it's really important to like make sure you're continuing to take those steps forward. And the other thing I'm thinking about is like you said, Jack, there's a huge risk when you're going out there and you know what you're doing and you've dialed this system in, like Andy's talking about for like the first tour, where he's like, we did A, B, and C. We sold these tickets, sold out tour, 300 rooms. Like, you're so ingrained in what you're doing that it's not just as easy as like, oh, partner or promoter comes in, they're going to be able to do the same thing. Because like, I think that the three of us and probably a lot of people listening, it's like, it's not normal what you've done with the first tour. Put aside what like the partner stuff and the promoter stuff for this tour. Like the first tour is selling 3,000 tickets. That's not the norm. Like that's not common knowledge yet of like, here's how you go out as a developing band or starting band or, you know, whatever you want to use the word, like, and sell a bunch of tickets. And we were doing the same thing. And it's not common knowledge around like, here's how we did that, or here's how you did that. And so I'm always very skeptical and like, in good faith, but of like, well, do these promoters know what they're doing if you hand it off? And so like what we're kind of doing is saying, hey, you guys do your thing. Also, I have all the campaigns built. Joe is helping build the campaigns out. So if we're like 4 or 5 weeks out from the show and we don't feel like the sales are where we want them yet, we're just going to turn on our marketing. And so it's like, just be it like you, I think the heart of the comment really is like, not just handing things off to people. If you're running your business, don't just hand it off and then be like, all right, well, it's fine now. And just like, you still need to kind of monitor and see how these systems work together. And over time, maybe you can hand it off entirely, but like not totally giving up the reins, which is something we've kind of been dealing with at the same time. And it's just like, there's a reason, Andy, that you reached this point to even have these conversations with the promoters and other people that reach this point. There's a reason. And in this community, a lot of that reason is just like effort and self-belief and really knowing what's going on. And so it seems just kind of foolish to ever think like, hey, you can just forget about it and just hope it's fine. Because that is a big risk to go out and potentially have a terrible 2 or 3 weeks of shows.
Oh yeah, absolutely. No, completely agree. And like you say, you do that once, and especially with a band of our level that we don't have a huge amount of track record to be able to prove ourselves. Like one bad tour like that could just end us, because all of a sudden word gets around the industry. The actual industry itself, once you start breaking down those barriers to, you know, getting past the gatekeepers, as it were, the industry is very, very small. Everyone talks. Everyone knows what bands are worth in terms of ticket numbers. If you have one bad tour like that, you're not going to get any festivals the next year. You're not going to get any support slots for any big bands, because, you know, no one's going to want to take the risk on you. You know, you've just gone out on a big tour with your first big promoter and they've lost a bunch of money because the tickets just didn't sell. You know, whether that's your fault or their fault, it's not a risk that I was willing to take. Absolutely.
I think that's a really great point and like a really great spot to kind of wrap up on. I didn't think about that we were going to wrap up on like really putting in the risks of not marketing your shows correctly or well. But you guys overcame this obstacle that I think a lot of bands get stuck on. It's pretty serious. I mean, like I would say like, what number would you guys give? I would say like probably 8 out of 10, maybe 9 out of 10 artists that we work with at the agency when we're doing tour marketing are dealing with some kind of inefficiency in their tech stack. And it's usually a pretty glaring one. I don't know. Maybe that number is a little inflated. What do you guys think?
I think it's higher, mate, in all honesty.
10 out of 10?
I'd probably say a 9.9 out of 10.
9.8?
Yeah, 9.8, 9.9 out of
man.
10. Yeah. Like I'm yet to work on a tour with the IndieX artist where the tech stack is bang on. Like, and it's every single time it's an issue with the promoter and the ticketing company. Every time.
Yeah, I was just going to say, and to be clear, like that's just something that you're sometimes stuck with. So having these kind of conversations and working to find solutions to get over those hurdles is really, really important. So this was great, man. Thank you so much for jumping on and sharing with us. I'd be remiss to say, if you are an artist that has a large fan base and you're looking to market your next tour, or you're looking to create more customers out of your existing fan base, and you want to bring on a team and want to work with folks like Andy and Ed and myself, we do have some slots opening up at the IndieX agency. So we'd love to hear from you if you think you fit those kind of criteria and you're looking to continue to grow. We'd certainly love to hear from you. I'll link to an application for the IndieX agency in the show notes. But Andy, thanks so much for being here, dude. This was a blast.
Thank you so much for having me. I had a lot of fun. Again, second time.
Yeah, for sure, man. We'll have to keep doing these regularly. It's always a blast to have you on. I hope that you guys get some inspiration from this and kind of take away both things that you could be doing right now with your live show marketing, and also things that you could potentially be talking about with your team, and knowing what kind of data and leverage you should bring to the table when having those conversations. So I hope you guys dig it. This was really, really fun and super inspiring. Like, as this has been developing, I know Ed and I were like nerding out as Andy was having it happen.
Dude, yeah. It's super inspiring, and also just crazy to listen, like, oh, I got everything I wanted because I did the legwork. Initially, I have these results and all these things that I can kind of just go out and now kind of call my shot. My last thought, actually, off of that, is the fact that you were willing to walk away if you didn't get what you wanted. I think that's super important too. It's like you knew what you needed and what you guys deserved in terms of the marketing stack. And you said a couple of times, we could have just gone separate if and done it again if we had to. So I think just like knowing your worth was really, really cool. And then kind of like how you leverage that into what I would probably call the coolest independent show marketing I've ever heard of. So good job.
Thank you, man.
Man, that is an accolade that I think is great to wrap up on. We'll catch you guys next time on Creative Juice. Thanks for being here. Peace out, Indies.